The Joe Rogan Experience.
Well, I had a thing, we're trying to do this thing for veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan who've gotten sick from burn pits. Are you familiar at all with burn pits?
No, what is it?
So in the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, this will go back generations, but in Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of the hired contractors to dispose of the detritus of war, they would build these sometimes 10-acre, 20-acre pits. Everything would go into them from mess waste to hazardous materials to computers to everything. They light it with jet fuel and they burn. So now you got guys that are downrange that are also they're basically camping out in a toxic waste dump, right? And incinerator. So they come home and you're starting to see pulmonary issues, cancer issues. These guys they're dying.
Yeah.
And they have to advocate against the government. So we're trying to put together, working with this team coalition, wounded warrior groups and people, VSOs and groups like that, to address this legislatively, similar to what was done for the 9/11 community, right? So I thought, because it's always about money. We always have money for war, but we almost never have money to pay for what are the absolutely could have seen coming a mile away consequences of what our veterans face when they come back, right? We don't take care. When they're out of sight, they're out of mind. And so my idea was you have all these profiteers, Raytheon, Halliburton, all these groups, make them kick in 10% big, a contingency in war, so that when these guys go home and the government backs away, there is money there to take care of what is the natural damage that's done to these people in the name of fighting for our country. So that they don't, and their families, these people have to become their own lawyers. They have to go in front of medical boards, and they have no support. Their families are oftentimes caring for them, whether they have health issues or traumatic brain injury or other kinds of invisible wounds, and they're kind of hung out to dry.
Yes, not kinda, very much so.
Right.
The UFC had a program back in the day where we were working with the Intrepid Center for Excellence to work with traumatic brain injury patients and to raise money for them. And we were doing this UFC Fight for the Troops to raise money for it. And what got me sick was how is it that we have to do this? Like, how is it that this isn't something that's taken care of in the budget, clearly in advance? You're blowing people up, and you're not preparing for people to come back injured. You're sending young, brave women and men to die for their country or risk severe brain damage, and you don't have enough money set aside to treat them when they return. I'm like, that's insane.
Everybody thinks that soldiers come back and they've got health care for life.
No,
they don't.
No, they don't.
You've got a 5-year window, but if you get something that they deem was not service related, so you could have been sleeping next to an open-air burn pit. There's a guy in Texas we work with his wife, Rosie, and Leroy Torres, who's literally like, his case wouldn't be, they denied his case in front of the Texas Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's evil. This
evil.
Absolute intention to deny health care. And it goes all the way back to Desert Storm. You remember the whole
to Vietnam.
Yes.
There are people who are still fighting the government over Agent Orange.
Right.
And still being denied.
Yeah. But yeah.
It's bonkers.
It's crazy. And the depleted radiation sickness that people were getting from the Iraq War.
Right. And the guys that went, that K2 base that was in, I think it was Uzbekistan, and it was a toxic weight, like these soldiers literally had like irradiated tar on their boots. And sick as shit, and they can't get, there's Blue Water Horizon. I'm telling you, like or inevitably, and they're always told the same thing. Hey, we don't have the science yet, and it's going to take us 20 to 25 years on the science. But you do have the science, because you got the science from Vietnam. Like, There's jet fuel burned at the Trade Center. So like the science is in. Use that science. Like stop fucking with these people and help them.
Yeah, the jet fuel burn at the Trade Center is another excellent example of first responders, right, that were terribly sickened, and many of them died because of the fumes, and people in the surrounding areas. In fact, Donna Summers died of lung cancer, and she lived near there. Yeah.
I don't doubt that it's related.
It could be related, but it's many people did.
Jimmy Zadroga, he was a cop, and he got really sick. I mean, those guys developed the pile cough like a day into the search and rescue. But Jimmy Zadroga, he gets sick, and they kept trying to tell him that first it was in his head, and then it had nothing to do with where you were and working on the pile and 9/11. And then they tried to say like it's from snorting drugs. They fucking, ruin this man's reputation as he's dying. He dies. They do an autopsy in his lungs. Everything you can possibly imagine from a pulverized building.
Jesus.
Asbestos, limestone, cyanide, grass. Like it was an utter disaster. And they just keep fighting people. And they're doing the same thing to these veterans now with the burn pits. And it's, the whole thing's just got to stop. There's got to be a presumption for these illnesses so that these guys don't have to fight so hard to get disability or health care.
I think along the same lines we're talking about reform of the police department, there has to be some reform of the healthcare system that deals with veterans, because it seems to be just this long history of doing it a certain way to save the most money possible. And the idea that these guys are sacrificial anyway, they're sending them off to potentially die. If they come back alive, they do their very best to not treat them and to not spend any more money on them. And it's sick. It's amazing we have so many guys that are still patriotic, that still want to go and do this, considering the fact that they're treated so poorly when they return.
Yeah. And they lose, listen, being in the military is isolating in the first place. There's just not that, it's only less than 1%, I think, of the population. Put on top of that, when you get out, you're used to being with a unit, you're used to that camaraderie, you're used to all pulling for the same, working as a team. Well, now you're removed from your unit, and if you're hurt, that's even further isolating. And in that moment, to have to then you're worried about your future, your family's future, and in that moment, that's when the government should step in and go, hey man, you fulfilled your service to us. You fulfilled that covenant. We will fulfill that covenant to you. We will send that, we'll do the right thing.
Right.
And they do the opposite.
They do the opposite.
It's some of the shit is so simple and fair and obvious. And you do wonder, how has this system become so corrupt and corroded that we can't anymore as a people do the right thing? Just do the right fucking thing. How did we get here?